Today I wanted to talk to you guys about mental filters, ways that our brain processes information and makes sense of the world around us and our own experiences. I do need to say that everybody experiences this type of thinking. It's very normal for us to make interpretations about the world around us. It's very normal for us to have ideas based on our past experiences, based on our current experiences, and what we have learned throughout our life. But when we start engaging in these thought processes very, very often, then it could be pointing to something else going on under the surface level, such as an anxiety disorder or depressive disorder. So today I'm going to go over some of the most common ones that I see in my clients, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk to you about tips and ways for you to help yourself if you do engage in this type of thinking. The first one I want to talk to you about is called catastrophizing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's pretty much our brain's way of making a catastrophe out of bits of information and not the full story. So this one I utilize. I think it's my favorite one. Not really my favorite one because I don't have favorites, but the one I definitely engage in the most, and it just makes things super scary. Pretty much something happens and you take that bit of information and you jump to the worst possible conclusion. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody you love told you they were going to text you back in like 5-10 minutes and then they never do. Instead of thinking, oh, well, I wonder what they're doing, maybe they forgot, you start to think the worst case scenario, like, what if they got in a car accident? What if they got kidnapped? What if they hate me and they just don't want to be my friend anymore? So your brain is taking that bit of information, your friend didn't text you, and you're catastrophizing and thinking that it must be because of the worst possible outcome. The next one I want to talk about is called jumping to conclusions. It's a very common one that I see, and this one has two subcategories, mind reading and fortune telling. So jumping to conclusion in general is just making interpretations about an event in the future with little to no evidence. In mind reading, you're pretty much making an interpretation about somebody else's thoughts or feelings with little to no evidence. So for instance, if your friend walks into the room and they're not as bubbly as they usually are, maybe usually they come in, they're like, hey, how are you? Oh my God, so good to see you. And this one time they just don't do that. Your brain will go to, they don't like me, they don't want to talk to me, they're mad at me. So they're making interpretations, your brain, is making interpretations about why said person is not behaving in the way that they typically do. As you can see, that could make us feel really bad about ourselves because instead of thinking, oh, I wonder if they are okay, I wonder if something's happening in their life that they want to talk about, maybe they're not feeling very well, we're really just hyper-focusing on how the situation can impact us in a negative way. And the second subcategory is fortune telling, and this one is pretty much making interpretations about the outcome of an event without adequate evidence. And this one can really get you in trouble because sometimes it'll keep you from trying anything new at all because you're afraid or assuming that it's always going to turn out badly. So this could be like, I'm not even going to apply to that job because I already know that they would never hire someone like me. Or I'm not going to try this sport that seems really fun because I already know I'm going to suck at it. Or I'm not going to ask that person out because I already know they're not going to like me. So we're already making interpretations about a future event and we don't have evidence to know that that's true. And it really keeps us from trying because we fear failure so much. The next common one is called overgeneralization. And overgeneralization, we're making broad interpretations about ourselves or a situation, again, based on little to no evidence or based on one situation alone. So for instance, if I go to a party and it's just really awkward there, maybe nobody talked to me, maybe I just felt out of place, I might then take that one situation and generalize it to all situations and start saying, you know what? I'm not good at socializing or I'm not good at parties. So instead of our brain really picking it apart and thinking maybe those weren't my people, or maybe that party was just off for some reason, or maybe really we didn't have anything in common and anybody in my situation would have felt the same exact way, we turn that into ourselves and start thinking that we're just awkward at parties or we're just not good at socializing, when in fact it could be so many other reasons why that particular party or that particular gathering may have made you feel that way. Another example of this is when you get into a relationship, let's say it's like your first relationship, and then it just goes really badly, and then all of a sudden you're saying, I just suck at relationships, when in fact it could have just been that one relationship that was bad. But maybe in another relationship with another person with different circumstances, you might find that you're not actually that bad at relationships. The next one is huge, especially for people who struggle with anxiety and depression. It's called disqualifying the positive. This is when you pay really, really close attention to the negative aspects of a situation, but ignore all of the good things. So I see this one so often with my clients who struggle with depression. So they'll come in to session and they will start saying something like, oh, I had a terrible week. I did nothing right. I suck. I'm sorry. You're going to be so disappointed in me. And then when I try to ask them, well, what went well? Let's try to find to see if something actually went well. They'll say, well, I took my medication and I actually, you know what? I worked out 3 times this week and I cooked for myself and I did this and that. And then by the end of that 5 minutes, they're like, oh, wait, maybe it wasn't so bad. It could also happen if your boss calls you into their office and they're like, hey, I really like that you're always showing up on time. You're such a team player. You are such a joy to have on our team. But I do notice that your emails have a lot of spelling errors in them. So can you please be more mindful and make sure that you correct those before you send it over to us? Instead of recognizing all the good things the boss said, you'll probably really hyper focus on that one bit of negative information that you heard, which was the spelling errors in the email. So then you will feel really insecure and start saying to yourself, oh my gosh, oh my God, my boss hates me. They're probably going to fire me. I'm not good at my job. You'll feel really insecure instead of, again, paying attention to the fact that there was a lot more information there. The next cognitive filter is the use of should statements. I should be more like her. I should do more of that. I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't think that way. Should. When we do so much shoulding on ourselves, then it becomes really difficult to truly appreciate the right that's going in our lives. And we become really, really hard on ourselves and we breed shame, because when we give ourselves those shoulds, then what we're saying to ourselves is the way we are right now as we are is wrong. The next one is emotional reasoning, which is the assumption that our feelings are a reflection of how things truly are. I feel like I'm a bad wife, therefore I must be a bad wife. I feel like I'm a bad friend, therefore I must be a bad friend. I feel like I'm a bad employee, therefore I must be a bad employee. So we start making assumptions about the world based on the feelings that we have about it, but we know that our feelings can sometimes be a little bit faulty, especially when they come to making interpretations about our surrounding world. I see this one a lot when people start learning how to set boundaries. So when I'm teaching somebody how to say no to somebody or how to set boundaries with family members or friends, and they do it for the first time. So let's say your friend asks you to take them to the airport and you're like, no, I really don't want to do this. And typically I would say yes, but I'm working on saying no. And then you say no. And at first you're really proud of yourself because you finally said no. But then as that sinks in, as you're driving home or as you're thinking about it later, you're like, oh man, I feel like a bad friend for saying no. Good friends would take somebody to the airport. I feel like I'm a bad friend, therefore I must be a bad friend. And that's why people really give up the boundaries a lot of times, because they feel bad about themselves. They're not used to it. And so they just give it up altogether. So again, this is what we call emotional reasoning. And I want you to remember that just because you feel a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that's how the world is perceiving you. The next one that's extremely common is all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking. This one usually uses the words always, never, every. So things like, you're always late, or I'm never good enough, or nobody ever talks to me. Nobody ever pays attention to me. As you can see, those are very general statements, and it's very unlikely that those are true for any of us, and they really make us feel crappy about ourselves. And they're not representative of what's really happening. I may suck at some things, but I may be good at other things. Maybe I suck at playing an instrument, but I'm really good at talking to my friends and helping them through difficult times. So it's very unlikely that we suck at everything, or that we do things always or never do things at all. I see this one a lot in relationships when people are like, you never take out the trash, or He never tells me he loves me. Using those phrases, it's really powerful. And if you're saying it to your significant other and really internalizing that, it could make the relationship a lot tougher. What you're really trying to say there is, I need more. I need you to take out the trash more often, or I need you to tell me that you love me more often. It's very unlikely that they've never taken out the trash or never told you that they loved you, but maybe you're not feeling like it's enough. And so let's speak to that. Let's say that directly in that way and ask for what we need. I guess that was a tip. So let me jump into tips. So if you're somebody who's been nodding your head yes to this list of mental filters or cognitive distortions, whatever you want to call them, then try out these tips. The first tip that I have for you is to become aware of the thought processes that you're having. I find it really helpful to give my clients like a journal or something where they can just be aware. So first of all, I print out this list and then I give it to them and just have them be mindful of it. So you could do that for yourself as well. You can just look at the list, look over it, and then you can notice yourself throughout the day, check in with yourself a couple of times and notice if you've had these types of thoughts at all and how often they're happening. If they're happening every once in a while, then that's okay. It's very normal. But if they're happening all the time, then that might be pointing again that something needs attention. So maybe you're dealing with something really stressful in your life, or maybe you have an underlying mental health issue and you can get help and start to bring awareness to this so that you can begin to process whatever led to this to begin with. The second step is to remind yourself and name it as the mental filter. So you can say something like, I'm recognizing this as a catastrophic thought. I'm recognizing this as emotional reasoning. You don't have to decide whether or not it's fact or fiction or true or not true, because you could probably get into a debate with yourself about that in your mind and it could just spiral into something completely different. That's not the point here. The point here is to just recognize that this might be a mental filter, and that gives you an extra few minutes or few seconds to really separate yourself from that thought and be mindful of what might be happening within yourself, which can shift things sometimes. And finally, and this step won't work for everybody, because if you are somebody who has a lot of trauma, then this next step, you might just want to skip that and you might want to just sit with the thought, notice the thought, and say to yourself, I'm having the thought, and just create that separation and then redirect your attention. But if you're not somebody who has a lot of trauma, and this technique might be helpful for you, but again, prefacing this with saying it's not helpful for everybody, but you can try to find two other alternatives to the thoughts that you're having. So for instance, if I'm having a catastrophic thought that my friend got kidnapped because she didn't call me at 5 o'clock and it's already 5:03, then I can sit down and say, okay, I'm having a catastrophic thought. I'm recognizing that I'm feeling this way about it. It's making me really anxious. And okay, what are other possible alternatives to her not calling me back when she said she would? And I could say, maybe her phone died, or maybe she's running late, or maybe she got caught up with something, and just allow myself to provide myself with other alternatives for that thought. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video or got something out of it. And if you did, I would truly appreciate your support by hitting the like button, giving me a thumbs up, and subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so. Let me know, what mental filters do you struggle with? I'll see you guys next time. Making a tongue twisted, always freaking tongue twisted. I don't know why when the cameras are on I just get so scared. Okay, let's turn it up. At the time that she said she was when we do so much shoulding on ourselves, I crack myself up. That's like a corny therapist joke.